Sorn tio te sparet. Ladies and gentlemen, love is a terrifying thing. Not because it's cruel or unkind, but because it's powerful. Saben shual tithishuai. Start so your might. Because it reaches into the deepest layers of who we are and exposes everything we've worked so hard to protect. Sarn to spart. When two people find themselves standing on the edge of love, they are not only confronted with the beauty of what could be samanoti spirit, sod, but also the fragility of who they are. Love doesn't merely connect two souls. It dismantles walls, pierces defenses, ted sowai and debas titus blarya. Star sowai and demands honesty. And honesty, the kind that strips away every layer of pretense, can be profoundly frightening. So aini adr sai. Tot esparda. Imagine meeting someone who understands you before you speak, who mirrors your emotions, your dreams, your insecurities. So why in tot spirit. And even your pain. There's a strange recognition as though you've met before, even if you haven't. Sorrow into till her spirit. And in that recognition lies both comfort and fear. Comfort because it feels like home. Fear because what if that home can be lost? T-U-I, star soagio, T-aspirite. What if the very person who sees you so clearly could also hurt you more deeply than anyone else ever could? Somundi ge tio, T-aspirite. Most people assume that fear of love comes from indifference, from not wanting to be tied down or hurt again. But more often, samaro T-spirit. The opposite is true. The greater the connection, the deeper the fear. It's not that you don't want to love. Sar, sol, ein tiotar spirit. It's that you already do more than you intended, more than you can easily admit, and more than your mind can rationally handle. Samayan tio tedi spirit. Love disrupts logic. It dissolves the neat categories of control we build to keep our emotions predictable. So ein dio teach spirit. And when two people both feel this, when both are drawn into something undeniable yet terrifying, they begin to move cautiously. So amenji tuo teach spirit. Carefully, almost pretending not to care as much as they do. There's a quiet tension in that space. Solagito teach splart. A magnetic pull that neither person fully escapes. You find yourself avoiding each other's eyes for too long. Soan to ti spirit. Yet feeling unsettled when they look away. You both hold back from saying what your heart screams to confess. So spirit. You speak in coded language, gentle jokes, and subtle hints. So in tio spirit. All the while hoping the other person understands what you're not brave enough to say out loud. So wujin tio tia spart. You're caught in a delicate emotional paradox. The desire to move closer colliding with the instinct to retreat. Samanyo stay spites 8. And beneath that struggle lies a deeper truth. Love, real love, requires vulnerability. Samo you hold time pa spites parait. It requires the surrender of the image you've built to survive the world. It asks you to admit that you need someone. Sorrow ainio ti spirit. That you feel something, that you care. And for people who have lived through heartbreak, betrayal, or rejection, samai and tio ti spirit. That kind of openness feels like standing unarmored in a battlefield. So you protect yourself the only way you know how, ti stawai. Star samio ainto ti spa widow, by pretending you're not afraid. By pretending it's not serious, by convincing yourself that you can control it. So I'm to th stirite. But you can't control it. Not real love. Real love doesn't follow rules. It shows up in your thoughts at 2 a.m. So brikotis superet. In the way your chest tightens when you hear their name. In the warmth that floods your mind when they laugh. Kar samamtio otias spirit. It's the pull that keeps you looking for their face in a crowd. The voice you can't silence even when you try to move only. Samoanti diversat y'all. Tio spirit. And when both of you feel that, when both are equally frightened and equally drawn in, it creates a dance of hesitation. Hayanto ti spirit. You move closer, then back away. You say too much, then apologize. Siyo ein e so ein di tio. T spirit. You test the boundaries trying to see how much you can reveal before you scare the other person off. It's not a lack of love. So I di tio teacha spirit. It's a surplus of it. The fear comes because the feeling is already real. This kind of connection is not ordinary. It's rare. Semingi to te spirit. And rare things carry weight. They demand respect and patiently. The fear you feel is not weakness. So dounto o te expert. It's evidence of how much this person means to you. Because love that is shallow doesn't scare you. So I engi tio te spirit. Only love that reaches into the soul, that forces growth and transformation, has the power to awaken such trembling. Teach spite. So when two people are afraid to love each other but already do, the signs are not found in grand gestures or dramatic confessions. So sporite. They live in the subtle moments, in the way you both hold back, in the shared glances that linger too longly. Sobeng tia sport. In the silence that feels charged, in the hesitation to say goodbye. So be ingi tuo ti spirit. In the unspoken words that hover between you like invisible threads. Fear doesn't mean the absence of lovely. Sobominget tuo te chi spirite. It often means its presence is overwhelming. This speech explores the delicate emotional battlefield. Somenintio to sprite. The space between love and fear, between longing and resistance. Somoanji, tiotr spawat. It is about understanding the signs that you both already love each other but are too afraid to admit it. Obito te spar sprite. Because if you can recognize those signs, if you can see them not as weakness, but as proof of something real, you might begin to understand that love isn't supposed to be safe. It's supposed to be real. Sama and tayo ti sprite. And sometimes real love begins not with confidence, but with trembling hearts standing across from each other. Sabunyo despite. Silently hoping the other feels the same. Love is the most profound mirror life ever places before us. Soidi suvidar tio ti spirit. When you meet someone who touches your heart in a way that words cannot explain, something inside you stirs. Samoing tio teaches spirit. It is as if every part of you that you have hidden, denied, or learned to silence begins to rise to the surface. So amen tio th spite. Love doesn't just reveal beauty, it reveals truth. And truth is rarely comfortable. When you begin to care deeply for someone, so ein tio th spite. You don't simply see them. You see yourself through them. Their eyes become the reflection of your own heart. Your flaws, soangi ti ot spart, your hopes, your fears, your capacity to give, and your limits to receive. Soam ti ot sparit. That's why love in its purest form is both exhilarating and terrifying. Saburinti to ti sparit. It exposes who you really are beneath all the defenses you've built. So windi tu ti sparit. The reason people fear this kind of love is because it demands authenticity. You can't hide behind your persona. Sovereignty, tiote spy right. Your practiced charm or the mask of emotional control. The person who mirrors your soul will see through it. Somebody in GTA takes spirit. They'll notice when your smile is forced, when your silence hides painly, when your laughter masks anxiety. Star so on all adi asuspayite. And instead of judging you, they'll simply hold that truth up to you like a mirror showing you the parts you've tried to ignore. So wide or so t spirite. It's disarming, even confronting, to feel so seen. Most of us spend years trying to control how others perceive us. So wangi to ti sporite. We curate our image, manage impressions, we guard our vulnerability. But when love arrives, it dismantles those strategies. Sto te sporite. You can't perform authenticity in front of someone who already knows the rhythm of your unspoken emotions. So nitio ti sporite. What's frightening about this reflection is not that the other person sees your flaws. Simonindio, tiutivi spirit. It's that they awaken your desire to become someone worthy of their gaze. Love has this way of awakening dormant potential. Simondi, TSP white. You start to notice your habits, your wounds, your insecurities because the presence of the other person makes you want to grow. Soagi, tochispirite. You want to meet their depth with your own. And yet that very desire for transformation can create fear. What if you fail to become enough? What if your imperfections are too heavy? Your history too complicated? Your emotions too unstable, you start to question your worth. Not because the other person makes you feel small, but because their love calls something higher out of you. When two people both experience this mirroring, the emotional landscape becomes intense. Each person sees in the other what they most long for and what they most fear about themselves. You might look at them and see compassion, strength, or depth and realize those are qualities you've buried within yourself. They might look at you and see tenderness, courage, or creativity and feel both inspired and frightened by the reflection. Somangi, How THE spirit. It's as if love becomes an emotional echo chamber. Each person reflecting not only affection, but also unhealed pain, old scars. Suwuduan TOT spite. And untapped potential. This is why such connections feel electric, magnetic, and at times unbearable. Spite. They are not shallow encounters. They are mirrors of transformation. In this mirror, you confront the truth about your capacity for love. You realize that love is not just about desire or attraction. It's about exposure. To love is to let another person see the unaided version of your heart. It's to risk being misunderstood. Rejected or left behind after showing someone the truest parts of you. That's why people who deeply love each other often hesitate to confess it. They're not unsure of what they feel. They're terrified of what their honesty might unleash. The moment you admit you love someone, you surrender control. You open yourself to the possibility of heartbreak. And in that surrender, your deepest insecurities surface. You begin to wonder if you are enough, if they feel the same. If the universe is cruel enough to let you feel something so powerful only to take it away. But love's mirror is not meant to break you. It's meant to awaken you. When you see yourself reflected in another person's affection, you begin to understand the parts of you that are still afraid of tenderness. You started to recognize how often you withhold affection, not because you don't feel it, but because you fear it might not be reciprocated. You realize that your defensiveness, your emotional distance, your caution, they are not flaws, but survival mechanisms born from past wounds. And yet, the presence of someone who loves you, even quietly, invites you to lower those defenses. It asks you to believe that maybe this time, love doesn't have to destroy you. Maybe it can rebuild you. The beauty of this mirror is that it teaches both people about courage. Real love isn't the absence of fear, it's the willingness to face it. It's the decision to stay open even when every instinct tells you to retreat. When you love someone who reflects your soul, you begin to realize that love isn't about possession or certainty. It's about growth, responsibility, and truth. Start sodermind to OTE spiarate. You are forced to see not only what you love about the other person, but also what you must heal within yourself to truly receive them. Start sowing TOT spirit. And when both people recognize this, when they both sense that what they feel of the deeper than attraction or compatibility, they often pull back not because they don't care, but because they sense the gravity of it. Sorin TOT spy right. They understand that this connection will demand transformation. In that hesitation lies a strange kind of love. Soingit otechi spirit. One that hides in silence and restraint yet burns brightly beneath it all. The fear you feel is not a barrier to love. Soang a d varsity star swirit. It is love's shadow, proof of its depth and reality. To see yourself reflected in another soul is the beginning of true intimacy. Somoang di toti esispirit. It is not an easy experience, but it is the most honest one. Because when two people are afraid to love each other, somiyote spite. But already dole, they're not running from love. Sawawa yi ad tiotelespirite. They are standing before the most powerful mirror life could ever place between them, trembling not because they are weakly, so andido tedi spart, but because they finally see how much this person truly matters. So moindi edivir shashi. When two people genuinely care for each other, but are afraid to love, their emotions often express themselves through avoidance. So modu hel evo tutia spirit. They withdraw, they become silent. They hesitate not because they are indifferent, but because they are overwhelmed. Soangitoti eshisperate. Emotional avoidance is one of the most misunderstood behaviors in human connection. Soma intotea spyite. People often interpret distance as lack of interest, when in truth it can be the very opposite. Soaro and oth spite. Sometimes the silence between two people is not empty. It is full of everything they are too afraid to say. So odi tati sparit. The retreat isn't a rejection, it's a defense. When love feels too intense, too consuming, or too real, how do you hail AVR CTA? Start samavito take spirit. The instinctive reaction for many is to step back and protect themselves from the potential pain that could follow. Samerge to techi spirit. The human heart learns through experience. Every heartbreak, betrayal, or disappointment leaves a mark. Somewhere in DDO ti spirit. Those marks become emotional memories. And those memories shape how we love. When someone new arrives, samain gito techi spirit. Someone who touches us in a way that feels familiar yet deeper than before. Soming tio tira spirit. Subconscious awakens both the desire to connect and the fear of being hurt again. Li. So einto ti shai spite. You start to feel exposed as if this person holds the ability to wound you in a way no one else could. So wengi tio tech spirit. And that thought alone triggers a reflex to hide. It's not that you don't want to be close. So wendi, so tar spirit. It's that your heart doesn't yet trust closeness to be safe. So you pull away. You answer messages a little later. Li, so when ti start o. Ti sparit, you avoid conversations that might become too intimate. You pretend you're busy. You act composed, even indifferent. So I'm gito teshi spirit trying to convince yourself that you can control what you feel. But deep down, so in GTO, TT spirit, you know that every act of restraint only confirms how much you already care. The distance is not indifference. Semun UTOT, TE spot. It's fear dressed as discipline. It's the mind trying to protect the heart from falling faster than it can handle. Soma DTOC spirit. And the same fear exists in the other person. They too hesitate. They too feel that tension, the pull to get closer. Sposio tu spawit, fighting against the instinct to run. What you're both experiencing is not a lack of love. TOT is spite, but an overflow of it too powerful to process at once. Sowo THE spite. Avoidance becomes the language of fear in relationships that are already emotionally charged. Tis oming to espart. You might find yourself overanalyzing every interaction, worrying that if you say too much, you'll scare them away. If you say too little, you'll lose your chance. You live in a constant inner debate. Should I reach out or should I wait? Sipite. Should I show how I feel or protect my dignity? Every decision feels loaded with consequence because deep down you sense how real this connection is. And realness terrifies people who've been broken before. It's not just the fear of rejection. It's the fear of being seen again, of opening the same door that once led to pain. Sometimes emotional avoidance takes subtle forms. It appears as sarcasm, emotional detachment, or intellectualization. Talking about feelings without ever fully feeling them. Salgi, setiwai, start sobainji, tuote spirit. It's when you change the subject when things get too personal or when you laugh off moments that could become serious. Somanjiko tvs spite. These are emotional defense mechanisms carefully built over time to protect you from vulnerability. But ironically, hezruyul a diversity why. Start somananto tiwak sispiward. Those very defenses are the proof of how deeply you already feel. If you didn't care, you wouldn't need to protect yourself. Somandido teach spirit. Indifference doesn't build walls. Love does, because love understands what's at stake. And yet, despite the distance, there are signs that the connection is alive. You find yourself thinking about them constantly. Their absence feels heavy, so wouldn't toti. Tasply to their silence loud. You notice details, how their tone changes, how their energy feels different. So waranito take sparit. How they retreat when things get too close. You recognize in them the same dance you're doing. Soringidado ti sparit. The push and pull between desire and fear. This mutual avoidance creates an emotional rhythm that feels both painful and magnetic. So when in shiznan so ti spirit. You both sense what's there, but you're too afraid to name it, because naming it would make it real. And once it's real, so in tio to ti spirit, it can be lost. But avoidance doesn't kill love. It sustains it quietly in the shadows of what's unspoken. So in dtio thc spite. There's a strange comfort in the distance because it keeps the dream intact. So an gitot he sprat. It's safer to love from afar than to risk losing what feels so rare. Yet deep down, that safety is an illusion. Skomium into ote spy ait. The longer you avoid confronting what you feel, the more you suffer from its absence. The connection remains unresolved. Hausman tviosai tiwis spirit. suspended between possibility and fear. And both of you, though pretending to move on, are still emotionally tethered by something unacknowledged but very real. Emotional avoidance is not cowardice. Sovereign AT, archspotch tiot. It's self-preservation. It's a learned pattern, one that develops when the cost of vulnerability once proved too high. So I am toch spirit, but love always asks, sooner or later, you realize that avoiding your feelings doesn't protect you. It isolates you. The fear of getting hurt becomes the very reason you stay alone in your longingly. And what you're really avoiding isn't the other person, it's yourself. Because to love someone deeply means facing the parts of you that are still healingly. When two people both retreat, both pretend not to care, both build walls for protection, something paradoxical happens. Their mutual fear becomes a form of communication. Each silence, each hesitation. Each unspoken word becomes an acknowledgement of what neither can say aloud. You're not pushing each other away because you don't feel anything. You're doing it because you feel everything. The distance is simply the space where love gathers strength until it can no longer be denied. In truth, emotional avoidance is love's disguise. It is what happens when two souls recognize each other before the mind can rationalize it. It's a temporary shelter before the storm of honesty. The fear that drives you apart is the same fear that binds you together. And one day, when courage finally outweighs fear, the avoidance will fall away, and both of you will realize that love never left. It was simply waiting for both hearts to feel safe enough to step out of hiding. Love, when it is real, exists in tension between vulnerability and control. This tension defines the human experience of intimacy. You want to open yourself to be known to connect without barriers. But at the same time, you want to remain safe, unshaken. Unheard. The paradox lies in the fact that you cannot have both. To love someone truly is to surrender control. It is to place your heart into the hands of another person, trusting that they will not destroy it. And for most people, to teach e-spirit, that level of surrender is terrifying. We build our lives on the illusion of control. Control over our emotions, our reactions. Our boundaries, our safety. But love, when it arrives in its truest form, dismantles that illusion. It asks for faith, not certainty. It asks for openness, not defense. When you begin to fall for someone deeply, your instincts divide. One part of you wants to let go completely, to dissolve into the connection, to say everything you feel without restraint. The other part of you wants to analyze, to measure, to keep your emotions in check. You become both participant and observer, watching yourself fall while trying to hold on to your composure. It's an exhausting conflict. This battle between surrender and self-protection. You crave closeness, yet you resist it. You want to trust, but you can't forget how trust once hurt you. You try to act calm, but your heart betrays you in every glance. Every hesitation, every tremor in your voice. Control is safety, and safety is predictable. Love is not. It's unpredictable. Chaotic and alive. It breaks patterns you've spent years building to keep your emotions manageable. When you love someone, you lose control of small things first. Your thoughts, your focus, your rhythm. They appear in your mind when you least expect it. You remember their voice when you should be thinking of something else. You notice how your emotions start aligning with theirs. Their joy lifts you. Their pain weighs on you. Their silence unsettles you. This emotional merging is the natural process of attachment. But to a mind that craves control, it feels like losing yourself. That loss of control often leads to fear-based behavior. You begin testing boundaries without realizing it. You might withdraw. So on a hawidi tiotei spirit, act distant, or even provoke conflict just to reassure yourself that you still have some power over how this relationship unfolds. So yuing tio tichi spirit. You create distance not because you want to, but because you need to feel you can. It's a psychological defense. Samu ID to techi spirit, a way of saying I can leave if I must, but deep inside you don't want to leave. You want to stay. Saurabandi how ti var sai preet. But staying feels dangerous because it means admitting that your happiness now depends, at least in part, somendi tio th sparit, on someone else's choices. And dependence for someone who values control feels like vulnerability. So I shall grant. TOTS spirits, what complicates this even more is that both people often share the struggle. You both want to feel secure. Sobaingi to tech spirit. To know that the other person will stay, but neither wants to be the first to let go of control. Samoeding to tatus pesarit. You both wait for proof of safety before showing the full depth of your feeling. You both hold back. Samun G to H sport. Afraid that revealing too much will make you lose your power. But love isn't a power struggle, it's a leap. Saroe tavar spirit, and two people and can't fall together if they're both holding on to the edge. Sti starts OIMTOT spart. The paradox of vulnerability and control is that the very thing we do to feel safe holding back actually prevents the safety we long for. So wanyo tia chi right. Real safety and love doesn't come from control. It comes from trust. It comes from knowing that even if things break, somoring did o techi spiritate, you will survive. It comes from believing that openness is not weakness but strength. So yuhai DVR site wise. Somorio ts by right. The act of loving someone while knowing they could hurt you is one of the bravest things a person can do. So Einstein o th right. And yet most people avoid this bravery by trying to manage love as if it were a logical equation. They want to predict its outcome. Somodo spirat. Calculate its risks and avoid its losses. But love refuses to be managed. It can only be lived. So ongito tich spirit. Control offers the illusion of power, but love offers transformation. When you allow yourself to love fully, you will be changed. Sta yuwa subangito tispai, you will lose parts of yourself that were built out of fear, and in their place something softer and truer will emerge. Sa'otivat spirit. You begin to understand that vulnerability isn't the opposite of strength. It is the foundation of it. So one in totech spart. Only a strong heart can remain open in the face of uncertainty. Sabuini opatus spite. Only someone who has learned to trust themselves can risk trusting another. Samuin GT OT spirit. Love teaches that lesson the most painful yet profound way. When two people are both afraid of losing control, Sayan tu otechi spirit. Their love becomes a quiet struggle. Every message is drafted, deleted, and rewritten. Every conversation carries a hidden tension. Sumunago tesh spirit. Every moment together feels like standing at the edge of something vast. Sabuji to ish spirit. Both wanting to jump and waiting for the other to go firstly. But within that struggle lies the truth of the connection. Somain to take spirit. The reason you're afraid to let go is that you already have. Somu and dikochtos spirit. The reason you're fighting for control is because this person already matters more than your defenses can handle. Eventually, so I get to OT spirit. Love demands a choice. You can stay behind your walls, safe but alone, or you can step forward into the unknown. So what until taste spirit, trembling but alive. You cannot experience deep love while maintaining total control. Two cannot coexist. So when ed are spyite. The heart cannot open and remain guarded at the same time. Love is not about having power. It's about having courage. Tote spyite. Courage to admit that you care. Courage to risk being hurtly. So ind tota spyite. Courage to let someone in even when every past wound tells you not to. In the end, the paradox dissolves not through control. Shevi varsatiwai. Start sai, tiochusper, but through surrender. The moment you stop trying to manage how love unfolds, you begin to truly experience it. Sobaim sparit. And if you are lucky enough to find someone who feels the same fear and still chooses to stay, samoings totai spot. You'll understand that love isn't about winning or losing. Kai suliso sparat. It's about letting go of control long enough to discover the kind of safety that only trust can give. Somun otichi spirit. There are moments between two people when words become unnecessary. A glance held for a second too long. Soa indispo tech spart. A silence that feels charged with meaning. A small gesture that speaks louder than any confession ever could. Solus we o tsis spolarate. These are the languages of unspoken love. When two people are afraid to love each other but already do. Soaming di idio tiaspart. That their connection often lives in the realm of energy and intuition. It is subtle but undeniable. Soam angitol texpirate. You feel it in the air when they walk into a room, in the heaviness that follows their absence. Soian to your heart spirit. In the electricity that lingers after a simple touch. Love, when it is real but unspoken, does not need verbal confirmation. Samar and DTVR spirit. It exists in the quiet understanding that passes between two souls who recognize each other on a level deeper than logic. Sabo I'm to te esper. This kind of connection is profoundly intuitive. It's not about what is said, but what is felt. Someone's to itwa echo right. The human mind tries to rationalize and analyze every detail, but the heart understands without explanation. Has of tabertote spirat. You sense what the other person feels, even when they say nothing. Their energy shifts and you pick it up instantly. Sama and to spirate. When they're hurting, when they're overthinking, when they miss you. You don't need proof. Right. You just know that awareness can be both beautiful and painful because it exposes how deeply entwined your emotions already are. When someone affects your mood without saying a word, it's no longer casual. It's connection in its purest form. But this kind of unspoken bond can also be terrifyingly because when love becomes intuitive, it also becomes inescapable. You can't hide from it even if you try. You can pretend not to care. You can avoid contact. You can stay silent. But deep down, you feel their presence like a quiet pulse beneath everything you do. It's as if a part of your emotional world is tuned to their frequency. You might go days or weeks without talking. Harsoangi, T-O-T spirite. But the moment they cross your mind, there's a pull, a vibration, a knowing. That's not coincidence. It's emotional resonance. Te spite. The bond doesn't disappear because the words were never spoken. It remains because something in your soul already recognized them as significant. The danger of this kind of connection lies in how easy it is to misunderstand. When feelings are hidden behind restraint, both people start to question the other's silence. You wonder, do they feel the same? Are they afraid like I am? Someone diote spirit. Or am I imagining it all? The unspoken nature of this love becomes both its magic and its torment. So indeed, oti spirite. You interpret small gestures like clues searching for confirmation. A certain look, a small hesitation. Soben tioti spirit. A message that feels slightly different. These moments become the emotional evidence you cling to. Saan to oti spirite. You're both trapped in a dance of subtlety. Each afraid to say what you already know. And yet, beneath the silence, so will into of your sar spirit. There's an invisible dialogue happening, a conversation of energy, intuition, and emotion that neither of you can control. Samin tiusdar so tati sporite. Sometimes when two people share such unspoken love, their connection feels like gravity. It doesn't ask for permission. So aingi, to tichi spirit. It doesn't follow logic or timing. It just exists. You might meet someone at a point in your life when you're not ready. Habodi, tidiwarsti. Start Solomon Tito T-Spart when circumstances make it impossible, when your fears outweigh your courage, but the connection still demands to be felt. Saboninti vivosum echispiti. You can't reason it away. You can't suppress it through distraction, and you can't forget it. Samidote spite. It's like a quiet hum in the background of your existence. So iengito T spiat, reminding you that something within you has already recognized its counterpart in another. Smoloditude spirit. This unspoken understanding is often what keeps both people close. Even when distance or fear keeps them apart. Sobawing itivo or sparsanat. You might not talk for weeks, but the moment you reconnect, it feels natural as if no time has passed. Salto aspirite. The energy between you never really fades, it just waits. Start so ing tote spirite. There's an emotional rhythm that continues quietly independent of your decisions. You can try to run from it. So ing. T-O-T, spirite. But deep down you know that this kind of connection doesn't vanish with avoidance. It lives in the undercurrent of your thoughts. So manjito te spart. In the fragments of your dreams, in the parts of your heart that never fully rest. Sobiu and te sparit. The reason this connection feels so intense is because it bypasses the mind and speaks directly to the soul. Sao I'm dituo tate spirit. Words belong to the intellect. They explain, justify, and control. But intuition speaks a different language. Samuyo th sporet. One that doesn't rely on evidence. It's the language of feeling, of recognition of silent truth. Somaliento t spirit. When two people share this level of understanding, their communication becomes spiritual. Every pause, every look, ts spirit, every subtle gesture becomes meaningfully. Sowagi to ts spirit. And that's why it's so hard to ignore, because it feels like truth even when fear tries to silence it. However, somo iteoti spirit, living in unspoken love is not sustainable foreverly. Silence may protect you for a while, but it also suffocates you. So moan de och spirit. The longer you keep everything inside, the heavier it becomes. What was once beautiful begins to ache. How chimizo tutira spirit. You begin to feel trapped between wanting to protect yourself and wanting to free yourself by speaking. Tasoan di to techi spirit. The energy that once felt magical now feels like pressure. Love, when unexpressed, turns inward. It becomes longing. Sidimar e hoindinua yetito tuer spite. Overthinking melancholy. You begin to miss someone who was never fully, but always more emotionally present. And they feel the same. Samuji tio tei spirit. Both of you carry the weight of something that exists and yet doesn't. Something alive but unnamed. So I in tio te spirit. Eventually intuition demands expression. There comes a moment when silence becomes unbearable. Tai spirit. When the truth inside you is louder than your fear. Salt so bind gia dht. Toti spirate. The unspoken energy that once connected you begins to push both of you toward honesty. It's not about grand confessions. So on to see spirite. It's about acknowledging what's real. When that moment comes, semundi to ti spirite. When one of you finally speaks the words you've both been holding back, there's relief. Not because love is suddenly easy. So wo yitio tie spite, but because it's finally given a voice. Unspoken love is one of the most delicate forms of connection. So I advr, tetsi spario tia sparit. It's where fear and truth meet in silence. It teaches you that words, though powerful, are not always necessary to feel deeply. Saman teoteshi spa'art. It reminds you that some bonds are sensed rather than declared, felt rather than defined. Somio ito tachsaiprite. But it also reminds you that love to grow must eventually be spoken. The intuition that first drew you together was the beginning. So wouldn't to tia spa'ite, not the destination. And if you are both brave enough to turn that silent understanding into words, you will discover that what once lived quietly between your hearts can finally breathe freely in the light. Fear and love are not opposites. They are inseparable companions. The presence of fear often signals the presence of something meaningful, something capable of altering who you are. When you truly love someone, fear naturally follows. You fear losing them. You fear being rejected. Samanantio TVR spirit. You fear being vulnerable and you fear the changes love might demand from you. But this fear is not weakness. Samungisto T spirit. It is proof of depth. You don't fear what doesn't matter. You fear what holds power over your heart. The trembling. Son gato T spirit. The hesitation, the uncertainty, all of it testifies to the significance of what you found. It is love's shadow. And it exists only because love itself burns so brightly. When two people are afraid to love each other, but already do. Sumu and yotiro, siplarai. Their fear is evidence of emotional truth. They feel something so profound that it disrupts their sense of control. Sordi tot spyite. Love begins to touch the most guarded parts of the self, the memories, insecurities, and desires that usually stay buried. Suman diu tote spite. That awakening is overwhelmingly. It forces both people to confront their fragility. Somagi tote spirit. And fragility in a world that teaches you to be strong and detached feels dangerous. Samoyan tio tati spirite. To love someone deeply is to hand them the power to wound you. That realization shakes even the most composed souls. Somundi totish spirate. It's why many people hide their feelings until they can no longer contain them. So wingito th spirite. It's why silence often hides love more often than indifference does. So untio tuta spirite. The mind tells you to be rationally, to stay safe, to protect your heart. But love doesn't listen to reason. Sumanto th spirit. It moves through instinct, emotion, and intuition. When love arrives, it doesn't ask for permission. It simply unfolds. Sobuenti adsty. Stominto t spirite, and that unfolding brings fear because it reminds you that you're human, that you can be moved, that you're moved. Tusable di to t spite. That your emotions are not under complete control. The fear itself becomes a measure of how real the feeling is. Swa ti spirite. The greater the fear, the greater the love that gave birth to it. So get spite. Because love that is shallow doesn't make you question your identity, your safety, or your past. Samugantiti spirite. Only love that reaches the core of your being has that power. Fear is also what gives love its sacredness. If love were safe, sargu tudi spirite. Predictable and guaranteed, it would lose its mystery. It would cease to be transformatively. Sa wendi to ti spirite. The fear of losing what you cherish intensifies its value. You begin to handle it with care to appreciate its presence. Tiso ein tio tichi spirite. When two people both feel that fear, it shows they both understand the magnitude of what exists between them. So undivi to tishi spirite. They may not be ready to name it, but their trembling hearts already know. Every pause, every hesitation, so many odiver swaitio. So sporiti. Every quiet retreat becomes a sign that they sense something immense, something that could change them forever if they let it. Sorengi tiote spart. Often the fear and love is not about the other person at all. It's about yourself. Samoan did hioti isperide. It's about the parts of you that doubt you are worthy of being loved deeply. When someone looks at you and truly sees you, hamsti o tiar spelite. Your flaws, contradictions, your broken pieces, it challenges the story you've told yourself about who you are. So ein dot, spy white. Maybe you've convinced yourself that love always ends in pain or that you're too damaged to be chosen. Somonanti ot spirit. But then someone arrives who sees through that narrative and loves you anyway. So ein to spirit. That acceptance can be terrifying because it demands that you rewrite the script of your identity. It asks you to believe that you are enough, that you are capable of being loved without conditions. And that kind of belief is difficult for people who have spent their lives protecting their hearts. Fear then becomes a threshold. It stands between where you are and where love wants to take you. Spirit. You can let fear dictate your steps, or you can use it as proof that something extraordinary is happening. Spirit, every great act of love requires walking through fear. It's the price of admission for something real. Samanji tdvi. The people who never feel fear and love are the ones who never let themselves love deeply enough. They stay comfortable. Samar sheng toi spirit, unchallenged, untouched. But the ones who tremble, who question, who hesitate, so anditio spirit. They're the ones standing at the edge of transformation. When both people feel this fear, soaim to tuspai, their connection becomes more than romance, it becomes growth. They begin to learn what courage means. And tot spirit. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to move despite it. Samangi tdh spirit. To love while afraid is to choose vulnerability over safety, honesty over pride, and truth over illusion. It's to say, I know this could hurt, but it's worth the risk. That is the highest expression of strength. Love transforms. Fear not by erasing it, but by giving it purpose. The irony of love's fear is that the very thing you're afraid of, loss, rejection, heartbreak is also the thing that makes love precious. The awareness that it could end makes every moment real. The knowledge that it's fragile makes you handle it with reverence. When two people both feel that fear and still stay, their love deepens beyond the superficial. It becomes rooted in awareness, gratitude, and sincerity. They don't take each other for granted because they know what's at stake. They value every word, every touch, every silence. The So when you feel fear and lovely, don't mistake it for a sign to run. Recognize it as confirmation that something real has begun. Isporet. Fear means you care. Fear means your heart is awake. Somuangito te aspirate. It means you found something that touches your soul deeply enough to unsettle your peace. Sobuditiu tirus. And if the person you love feels that same trembling, if you both find yourselves afraid of what this connection could become, then that fear is not an obstacle. It's the proof that you're standing on sacred ground. In the end, love and fear exist together because they are both born from the same truth, the recognition of something precious. You fear losing what you value most, and that fear sharpens your awareness of its worth. To love despite that fear is the purest act of faith two human beings can make. Saying, Tispurort, I see how fragile this is and I choose it anyway. That choice, that willingness to risk is where love stops being a feeling and becomes something divine. Love is not for the faint of heart. It is a mirror that reflects both your beauty and your brokenness, your longing and your fear. When two people stand before each other, trembling but unable to turn away, that is not weakness. It is sacred bravery. Because to love when you are afraid is to defy the very instincts that keep you safe. It is to say, I will open myself to the possibility of pain because the possibility of connection is worth it. That decision alone separates the shallow from the profound, the temporary from the eternal. The truth is love is not meant to be comfortable. It's meant to wake you up. So you're a divars aisle. Start sawaguren tuoti spirit. It's meant to challenge you to tear down the walls you built to survive and to remind you that life's greatest moments always carry risk. Samoan tu ti spiait. You can't experience real love without surrender, without letting another person touch the unguarded parts of you. Start sowarin tu hote splight. That's why fear shows up. It's a sign that your soul recognizes the magnitude of what's unfolding. And when both of you feel it, when both of you are scared yet still drawn toward each other, you've already begun something extraordinary. So don't run from the fear. Hold it. Let it remind you that love is alive in you. The trembling in your chest, the uncertainty in your words, the ache when you think of them. It's all proof that your heart is awake. And if both of you can stand in that fear and still choose to stay, still choose to care, still choose to try. That's not just love. That's courage. That's destiny revealing itself through human vulnerability. Because love, in its truest form, is not the absence of fear. It's the triumph over